The world feels a bit toxic and blah these days, doesn't it? The same old people coming up with the same old solutions for big problems that still don't work. We need to change the game. Well, welcome to Women Advancing. Join me, host Kate Byrne, in this dynamic bi-weekly podcast, bringing together female founders, funders, and thought leaders. Listen to the people driving change, how they got there, how you can help, and yep, how you might just be the next one to advance. Proof that all ships rise with women at the helm. That's what happens when Women Advance with Kate Byrne.
Hey everybody, it's your host Kate Byrne. What are the rules in today's workplace? It's always been confusing, but now more so than ever. Well, who better to ask than Stephanie Mehta, CEO and Chief Content Officer of Mansueto Ventures, home of the two brands that one could argue created the notion of the future of work in the first place, Fast Company and Inc. Now, still relevant to the day are what were then considered to be the new rules of business, emblazoned on the premier issue of Fast Company. Those rules were simple. Work is personal, computing is social, and knowledge is power. With its last line inviting a challenge that many have taken on and continue to this day: break the rules. Well, during our time together, we cover a lot, from leading a multi-generational team to the new Ignition Schools ranking, a joint project between Fast Company and Inc., capturing the potential of academic institutions serving as economic multipliers. How lateral career moves are okay as long as you're learning, and insights on some of the biggest myths of what entrepreneurs and perhaps leaders tell themselves. There's some other tasty tidbits, so listen in to make sure you get your full serving. You'll enjoy and you'll learn a tremendous amount. Welcome, Stephanie Mehta, the CEO and Chief Content Officer of my alma mater, Fast Company, Inc., and Mansueto Ventures. Welcome to Women Advancing. We're really excited to have you here.
Thank you, Kate. I'm glad to be here.
You have been one busy lady, traveling here, there, and everywhere, which I think is just sort of a natural state of being. But I want to start with kind of talking a little bit about you, then we'll talk a bit about media, future of work, leadership, and then some new programs that you all are working on, which I always love because they're among the best. Of course, I'm a little biased, but looking at you, what were some of the key turning points in your career that got you to where you are today? Certain milestones.
Thanks for asking that question, Kate. I feel like there were a couple of milestones in my career that were real turning points. I think for me, the first was deciding to write for my college newspaper. I didn't really think that I was going to pursue a career in journalism, but I went to a university, Northwestern University, that had a really strong journalism program. And my dorm mate came back from the newspaper one day, and she had a front page story in the Daily Northwestern as a freshman. And I thought, how does that even happen? I mean, I had never worked for my high school newspaper. My family subscribed to newspapers, but I never really understood the mechanics of it. And I just thought it was so cool that you could walk into the newspaper at 3:00 in the afternoon on a Monday and then have a front page story on a Tuesday. And this is, of course, before digital and websites and online. And so I followed her in, and it really changed my life. They were kind enough, even though I was not a journalism major and had never written a news story in my life, kind enough to let me join the new reporter's desk. And I was bitten by the bug. And so that was very transformational for me professionally, because it led me down a path of pursuing internships and pursuing a career in business journalism, which has, of course, defined my whole career. And then I'd say the other couple of turning points that have been really notable, and I like to tell this story, especially if there are young listeners, is that for much of the early part of my career, I was more focused on taking jobs where I could learn something. And so oftentimes I was willing to make a lateral move or even a move on paper that might look like a step backward in order to learn something. So when I was at the Wall Street Journal, I was a deputy bureau chief, albeit for a small bureau. It was our small business team. And I was assisting the editor and moving copy. And I think a lot of people would have said, wow, you're a deputy at the ripe old age of 26. But then there was an entry level reporting opening in the tech group. And I recognized that at a place like the Wall Street Journal, the path to advancement was really to cover publicly held companies, to be part of where the action was. And this was in the mid 90s, and telecom was really hot. So I made the jump to being a telecom reporter after having been a deputy editor. And then after 3 or 4 years covering tech at the Wall Street Journal, there was an opening at Fortune. And again, it was for a writer position. It wasn't a particularly big title or a big salary. But after 6 years at the Journal, I had learned to be a really good reporter, but I had never learned how to become a feature writer. You really had to carve out time if you wanted to learn feature writing. So I made the leap from the Journal to Fortune, even though, again, on paper, that would have looked like a lateral move. But I just wanted to learn something new. And so for me, I think those inflection points in my career were driven by a desire to advance a skill set as opposed to trying to chase the next tier in my professional resume.
Well, the thing that I love about this, Stephanie, is, and it's a really good thing for all listeners to think about, is so often people may take a look at your CV and say, wow, that's weird. What? To your point, it's all about the escalation. It's about the linear climb. And so often you have your own method. You know exactly what you're wanting to learn out of it, and you're going to end up getting there because there are certain skills. And to that end, which skills do you think you relied on most earliest in your career?
I would say, and Kate, very quickly, I just want to acknowledge that it's a real privilege to be able to make those choices based on what you think you need to do professionally. I completely acknowledge that there are people out there that need to pay off student loans, need to support a family, need to make the move that they have to make to pay the bills. So I want to be the first to acknowledge that this was coming from a place of incredible privilege and luck. In answering your question, I think the skills that held me in good stead in the early part of my career and that I've taken with me to this day is just preparation, especially as a young journalist and as a young woman of color, going into situations where I was interviewing people who were CEOs of big publicly held companies. I felt like the only way I could hold my own in those situations, even though I had the full backing of a place like Fortune or the Wall Street Journal, was to come in really prepared. And so, one of my great mentors, Carol Loomis, who was the sort of dean of business journalists at Fortune, she used to talk about how she would read 5 years worth of annual reports before she would even begin to report on a company. And I can't say that I ever did that much reporting, but it was an important lesson to learn that before you even begin asking questions, before you go into that first interview, even if it's just a background interview or an informational interview, it's really important to come as prepared as you possibly can be. And these days, there's no excuse not to be completely prepared because all of that information is available online. Plus, there's a wealth of stories about the company or the executive you're about to interview that are available. And again, I think these are lessons that apply in any industry. Do your homework.
Absolutely. But I also have a question too, going back to the point of, making that shift. You were leading a bureau, and then you went on to go back to writing. And now here you are actually overseeing an entire media organization. What was that like? I mean, those shifts, in some ways you go from peer to boss lady. How did that feel? What was that like? And how did you navigate? Because that can be sometimes tricky, I think, and it can also be amazing.
I think that I've been able to navigate it in large part because I have a really strong team that supports the work that we do at the executive level, at the senior leadership level, and then sort of all throughout the organization. And so, there's that phrase, it's lonely at the top. And certainly there are certain things I try to shield my peer group and my executive leadership team from. But for the most part, I feel really fortunate that I don't feel like I'm in this alone. I feel like there are people that I can talk to individually about challenges that we're facing in the business and then collectively. And because, as you know, Kate, so many people are homegrown in our organization, we've all had the same journey. We've all gone from being peer to manager to executive. And so there's a lot of a shared experience there that enables us, I think, to navigate that challenge of having to shift perceptions. That all said, we are a flat organization. And so while I have a different title and I sit in a different office, although my office is not as nice as it used to be, I had a better view when I was an editor. My door is always open. I just instituted formal office hours, even though anybody I would like to think can come find me at any time. And so even though I have a different job title, we try to maintain that flatness in the organization.
Yeah, that's what I would think. So, what would you say then is an outdated piece of leadership advice that women should ignore immediately, that possibly even you were told, aside from at the top?
I would say there's a couple of outdated pieces of advice. I think this one is interesting because I don't practice this, but I believe it to be true. I think there's an outdated piece of advice about not showing too much emotion at work. My personal style, of course, is to try to maintain an even keel, just because that's how I operate. But I encourage it when my female and male colleagues show emotion and show passion for the business. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's encouraged. But it comes back to being authentic. It would not be authentic for me to be overly reactive to anything. My personality, and we've done disc studies at our company, and it's really interesting. People's personalities really do show up in those psychology studies that they do on teams. I'm right in the center. I'm just that person who's got that like right balance of rational and emotional. But I have other people on my team who are really passionate, and I encourage it. And then I have people who are really, really like they don't give you any indication of how they're feeling in either direction, because that's their authentic self. And I think that's good too. And I think a really great team has a mix of all of those personalities.
Right. Well, and I would think, now given the number of multiple generations we have under any given roof, there's got to be different methods of communication, different methods of power. Has that actually also helped shift the aspects of certain stories, or the way certain stories are told, or I would even say where they're told, or which pieces of a story are, say, put either digitally versus, I guess you would say print, because you're one of the few brands that actually still does have a fabulous print magazine, I would say.
Thank you for saying so, Kate. There's a couple of things I would say about having multiple generations in the workforce, and particularly newcomers to the workforce. They are great for our journalism, and they're great for our culture. And it's for the same reason. They are our early career employees are the ones who, I think for the most part, help us tell stories that you can't get anywhere else. We empower our interns and our, again, early career folks, and they can be of any age. But if you're coming in and you're new to the profession, I think they lack the cynicism of people who've been doing this for a while. And because they're empowered, they're going out and finding the stories that you're not going to necessarily read in the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times or the Economist. They're the ones that bring us really interesting stories about internet culture. They're the ones that bring us really interesting stories about the intersection of design and business, which is a core competency of fast companies. They're the ones that help us understand what's happening with the creator economy, which is something that Inc. is increasingly pushing into, because creators are at the heart, entrepreneurs. So they're great for our coverage, and in part because what they are writing about and hearing about and talking about helps inform the way we run our business, they are in many cases the ones driving us to say, can we do things differently? Can we do things better? Can we be more progressive in our approach as leaders? And sometimes the answer is no. Quite honestly, we're a small organization. We don't have tons of resources, but where we can, we really do try to listen to what's trending and what's happening in the workplace and how early career employees are experiencing work. And I think that helps inform how we go about things.
Well, so with that younger generation and multiple generations, I would say, kind of combined with more and more women, such as yourself, coming into the senior leadership places. I mean, yeah, Amy Bernstein was just named Harvard Business Review editor-in-chief. Go Amy, and a host of others. Will the stories shift? Will there be a, I don't want to make it so much about feminine sensibility, but do you think that there will be, because women tend to be broader based systems thinkers and kind of overarching insights, do you think we'll see a difference in what's covered in media?
I think we're already seeing it, Kate. I think the fact that we are still having a conversation about return to office,
Yeah.
and there's such a heavy, and that there's a debate about return to office, not that it's been a fait accompli or that everybody is writing that, Jamie Dimon, rah, rah, love what he's saying about 5 days back in the office. The fact that that's actually a debate, I think reflects the number of women and early career folks in the workplace. And by the way, that cuts both ways, because I do think there are a lot of early career employees that would like more in-office engagement. But I would say, you and I have been in this industry a long time. When I first started writing for the Wall Street Journal in 1994, there would not even be a work-life section. Or there were a couple of reporters who would cover occasionally some things around what they used to call like job sharing,
Right.
or there would be some conversations about, daycare in the office. But the idea of even having work-life coverage, and now the Wall Street Journal, I mean, some of their most read stories on their site are stories about work life or return to office or office culture. Those are all stories that I think directly have the fingerprints of women editors and influenced by multiple generations in the workplace. And not because they're women's issues, mind you. I mean, return to office cuts across everybody. But women have elevated work life into a major pillar of business news coverage that just wasn't the case 30 years ago.
Absolutely. And I would say in some cases, even men have benefited potentially from it. I remember back in the day that we did at Fast Company when we did the Balances Bunk coverage,
Yeah.
right? That was the beginning of that whole storyline, which I think is fascinating. Well, so what are some of the most interesting topics that get you excited nowadays that you all are looking at?
A couple of things. AI is really interesting to me. I approach it with a mix of concern and excitement. The tech reporter in me is really fascinated by it and thinks that it's has the potential to be incredibly transformational for businesses and society. The media executive in me worries about its impact on our business and its impact on not only the quality of the work we do, but also the way we protect our journalism and our intellectual property. When these technological tools are just able to scoop up entire swaths of our intellectual property often without compensating us. But AI is definitely a story for the ages. I think it's going to continue. I am fascinated by what's happening right now with the evolving relationship between technology executives and the administration. I'm not going to betray any kind of political or personal bias here, but there's no question that there has been an interesting realignment of the way that technology executives in Silicon Valley in particular engage with government. It used to be non-engagement, with the exception of Google, which had always been very savvy about engaging with politicians, but we're in a brave new world and it's fascinating to watch. And then because of our the two titles that our company publishes, continue to be really interested in the story of environmental impact, because I think that while there may be a slowdown in government support for innovation around climate, I certainly think that there's going to continue to be really great innovation in this area. And then, reflecting Inc. magazine's point of view, the way entrepreneurship is going to evolve, and again, how you measure success as an entrepreneur, I think, is going to change. There was a time when, even though the Inc. 5000 doesn't measure employee numbers, the size of your employee base was definitely a way, it was a meter or a metric of your growth. And even today, when you ask banks to define how they say mid-market, often they define it by the number of employees a company has. Today, you can be a multi-billion-dollar company with 2 employees.
I'm going to say exactly. Thanks to technology. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you measure success as an entrepreneur? What does entrepreneurship look like? And how does entrepreneurship continue to be an engine for economic growth in the country when perhaps it's not a job creator?
But yeah, exactly. Is there what do you think the biggest lie is that entrepreneurs tell themselves? Or maybe it's not a lie. A lie might be too harsh. Maybe it's fabrication, a euphemism. I'm trying to think of what the alternative word would be. But how do you think they fool themselves?
I think there is a myth of the entrepreneur as lone wolf. And the truth is that most successful entrepreneurs can't do it alone. You can't scale by yourself. And they're kind of fooling themselves if they think that they did it without help. Now, again, I don't think most successful entrepreneurs would ever say they did it alone, but we have a couple of imperious entrepreneurs out there who probably would not be willing to spread the credit.
Right. And now I know one of the things with regards to Fast Company, you cover some of the world's most innovative and creative businesses. Has there been a startup or a business model that made you say, damn, I wish I'd thought of that?
I would say that I've been there's a ton of businesses that I wish I had thought of. I think on the media side, I would say I would have wished that our titles could have been faster to jump on newsletters. I think that we have a number of very good newsletters. I don't think we fully appreciated the power of newsletters. And it's been interesting to see the evolution of Substack. And I do wonder if there could have been a model whereby you could have had established journalism sit side by side with sort of creator-driven journalism.
Exactly.
So that is a business model that I think, I wish we could have explored further. I think that we are continuing to push into newsletters. I write a weekly newsletter, and frankly, I'm glad for it because it does keep my writing skills, such as they are, sharp. And it's a good way to engage with CEOs. The name of the newsletter is Modern CEO. So I get to talk to a lot of CEOs, and that's kind of my MBA. Every conversation I have with an executive is an opportunity to learn. And I do admire a lot of what the direct-to-consumer packaged goods companies have done. That's not something that would have made sense for our business. And I know there's a little bit of a winter happening for some of the DTC brands. But I think that it says more about the way these companies were funded and the way that they were incented to grow at any cost as opposed to growing profitably, that exposed some of the cracks in some of the companies. But I think the model and the ability to go directly to your consumer and to have that first party data and to develop super fans is a really good one.
It's a smart one. And it's one that people can adapt and assign to any industry, really, in one way or another. I want to talk a little bit now, too, because we've talked a lot about the innovative aspects of Fast Company, and also, obviously, of Inc. and the entrepreneurial spirit. I'd love you to talk a little bit about the Ignition School program. I just think this is really, really great. And I'm going to let you tell us about it.
Thank you for the opportunity, Kate. So at the end of 2023, the editors of Inc. and Fast Company got together and thought it would be really interesting to come up with a whole new way of recognizing academic institutions. There are great lists. You're intimately familiar with some of them
Yeah.
that recognize academic excellence, that recognize even the sort of schools that have a great track record for helping their graduates find jobs, for helping their graduates excel in the workplace and in society. Based on Fast Company and Inc.'s unique areas of expertise, we wanted to put together a program called Ignition Schools. And what we sought to recognize is sort of academic institutions as multipliers inside their communities and inside the economic ecosystems of business. And so rather than just recognizing some schools for minting the most entrepreneurs, which is certainly interesting, or some schools for technology transfer, we thought, what if we blended all of that? What if we found a way to recognize schools that really were igniting the economy and the economies around them? And so for the first year in 2024, in September, we published our first Ignition Schools list. We're doing the list again. Applications will open soon. We'll make sure to share that information when it's available. And we'll publish a list again in the fall. But what we realized is that this is not a badge for, I think some schools would like this as a way to help drive admissions, but I think that this is not so much a recognition for admissions programs, but really a badge of honor for the institution as, as a parallel to a business. We talked earlier about how certain entrepreneurial businesses create, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of jobs. I think there is an equivalent for institutions, and it doesn't have to be a college. I mean, it doesn't have to be a four-year or research university. It can be four-year colleges. It can be community colleges. These academic institutions really can be the lifeblood of local and national and even international economies.
Absolutely. And that's why I think that's what I love so much about this is that to me, it's a foot in the door of reimagining education and what it can be and what it can look like. And once again, putting together innovative thinking about it. So with this too, to me, it's a great example of you being a leader, taking a look at, okay, I'm in the media industry, I've done business, but how can I marry those two things? And understanding that the future of the economy is really based on these next generation of entrepreneurs and these businesses. So one takes a look out on the horizon and you say, okay, I don't have a crystal ball, but that's an interesting trend. It's often been said that leaders have to be adaptable. Where do you draw the line between being adaptable and, wending your way and navigating your way through, choppy waters and simply caving to the latest trend? Like, how can you tell what's your true north on? No, I'm going to go with this because I have confidence it's real.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer because being in a leadership role in any institution these days is so complex, and there's change coming at you at from all corners at all times. And so you really do have to just be as nimble as you possibly can be. For Mansueto Ventures, Fast Company and Inc., our North Star continues to be original, reported, high quality journalism that people can't get anywhere else. And I think that if we maintain that as a North Star for all of our businesses, and I think that we are very fortunate that our ad sales teams and our integrated marketing teams and our consumer marketing teams all use that as their North Star as well, because that's the kind of content that our advertisers want to be adjacent to. That's the kind of content our readers want to read. That's the kind of platform that makes sense for an academic institution to want to be recognized by. So even though there are all kinds of choppy waters, I would say that the thing that I always tell our staff at our North Star is quality journalism.
Well, and the thing that I've always admired about both of these brands, as well as some of the others you mentioned, but particularly these two, is you've got this natural gift of actually inspiring people, but also giving them the practical how-tos on how they can actually activate it and they can get involved too. So it's not just a pretty puffy, bunch of smoke. It's actually, no, you really could do this. It's going to take work, but you really can do this. So I want to jump in a little bit to something new that I'm kind of playing around with, and it's this notion of a rapid round. So really,
Okay.
what's a leadership book that you think is actually worth reading?
You're catching me off guard. A leadership book that's worth reading.
I can cut that one out.
Yeah, you could.
How about this?
I'm blanking.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. What about worst career advice you ever received?
Be an engineer.
What a loss the world would have suffered had you done that.
I know. Well, or, you never know. Would have been like a femtech giant. Who
There
knows?
you go. Exactly. Hey, it's not too late. There's many opportunities for you to still do that. And if you could, I don't want to say steal a skill, but if you could borrow a skill from any leader, what would it be and from whom?
Um, I would say I can't think of a specific leader. Well, I can think of a few specific leaders, but I don't want to name names. I think it's the ability to compartmentalize. I can do it to a certain extent, but I find it I find it really hard to not take my work home with me.
I'm right there with you. Exactly. Many a sleepless night or the 3 a.m. wake up call.
Yeah.
That's why you're being awakened in the first place. All right. Well, then in closing, what advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Stop looking over your shoulder. I feel like when I was, especially when my first couple of jobs, I was always worried about what everybody else was doing. And I would, it was hard because when I started at the Wall Street Journal, my peer group was Ed Felsenthal, who went on to be the CEO and editor in chief of Time Magazine. Rebecca Quick, who went on to become a CNBC anchor. Who else was in that cohort? Rebecca Blumenstein, who's now CEO of NBC News. I mean, I ran with a really fast crowd and I was constantly like comparing myself to them. And I think if I could talk to my younger self, I would say, don't worry what everybody else is doing. Chart your own path. It'll all be fine.
Absolutely. And then, so where do you then, looking forward, where do you see the greatest opportunity for women moving forward?
Everywhere. I
Right?
mean, yeah, whatever women want to do, they can do. Again, we're recording this in early 2025, and I think for some people it feels challenging. It feels like there are fields where women have made great strides, and suddenly it doesn't feel like those strides are going to be respected or reinforced. But I have incredible faith in the power of women individually and collectively. And I do believe that when women put their minds to something, we're unstoppable.
It's done. So true. So true. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for your many pearls today. I really appreciate it. I think we're really lucky to have you leading one of the most popular, I will say, and I think also growing, powerful, and really incredibly relevant brands today, be it Fast Company, be it Inc., be it Mansueto Ventures. So thank you for joining Women Advancing. Look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Kate. Good luck.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. May this episode inspire you to move forward. Be sure to go to iTunes, Spotify, katebyrne.co, that's KATEBYRNE.co, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and listen to even more episodes. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. And be sure to meet them on the next Women Advancing. Ta till next time.